This series is made possible by all of my patrons. More about that at the end of the video. Today we have finally arrived to the topic a lot of you have anxiously been waiting for me to talk about. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not looking forward to this at all. We will talk about fertilizers. Do you want to know why I dislike this topic so much? For whatever reason, people get very divisive, very angry, very upset about this, and let me just tell you right away, I do not care. You can feed your plant with whatever you want. It is your plant. I'm just going to share what I use, why I use it, and how it has proven itself over time. And do not, I repeat, do not tell me how you cook bananas, how you add baking soda, baking powder, whatever, yeast. I'm not making bread here. Don't tell me about fish heads. I absolutely hate fish soup. I don't want to hear about that. And especially, do not talk about collecting your own urine. Oh, I know. I have seen what you talk about in the Facebook groups.
It's disgusting. Everything okay? It was delicious.
Right. But to be completely real with you, I don't think this topic needs to be so divisive. I don't think that anyone needs to get upset about it. I think we can all share what fertilizers we use, and I'm not trying to convince anyone to start using the fertilizer that I use, and I don't really like it when someone else is trying to convince me. Share your experience, and that's that, and leave it there. The truth is there are a lot of fertilizers that will do well for your Hoyas. They're really not orchids, so they're not really that picky about it. Now, are there some fertilizers out there that will do better than others? Absolutely, but at the end of the day, you really can feed your plant with whatever you want, even fish head soup. Have fun. However, I do want to stress something out right away in the beginning. I think a lot of people have this misconception that their plant is not growing well or is not blooming because of the fertilizer that they're using, that they're not using a good enough fertilizer. And I don't actually think that is true. I know that some people grow Hoyas without using any fertilizer. They don't ever feed them, and they do grow well for them and they bloom for them. And that is because environment is much more important than the fertilizer. You will need good light, adequate temperature, adequate humidity. Some will like more, some will like less, in order for these plants to really grow well. If some of the conditions are not matched well, for example, if the plant is in low light, fertilizer is not a good substitution for that. If it's too cold, fertilizer is not going to solve your problems, or if there is not enough humidity for the species that want that. And just to be clear, I'm not saying by any stretch of imagination that fertilizer isn't important, but I just want to say it is not as important as good conditions, and it should never be used as a substitute for good conditions. Typically, when we talk about fertilizers, we talk about three main components of the fertilizer: nitrogen, N, phosphorus, P, and potassium, K. And all of these three components do have a certain role, or actually certain roles in plants, and are vital to the plants. When it comes to nitrogen, I would say that nitrogen is perhaps the most important of them all, though none of them should really be taken lightly, but it just, in my opinion, and sounds like that because nitrogen is part of amino acids that build proteins. And these amino acids aid cell division and with that plant growth and development. And nitrogen is sort of needed for all enzymatic reactions in plants. It is a major component of chlorophyll, and we know how chlorophyll is important. It is absolutely necessary for photosynthesis. Phosphorus plays a major role in energy storage. It is part of RNA and DNA and a major part of them. It helps with root development, it helps with flower initiation, and that is why often people will tell you that fertilizers with high levels of potassium are good for flowering. We will talk about that a little bit later in the video, and if there is validity to that claim. Potassium is important for plants because it has a role in promoting metabolism of plants. It regulates plants' use of water, opening and closing of leaves, stomates. Until now, I thought that the plural of stomata is still stomata, but I found out that it's stomates. This absolutely concerns no one. It also apparently has an assisting role in photosynthesis, and it also improves plants' resilience to disease. These three components will be part of all the fertilizers, and listed on the back you will see, on the back of the fertilizer, not on the back of my hand, but listed on the back of the fertilizer, you will see the ratios in which of these components will be present in the fertilizer. So you will notice that for some plants you will have higher levels of nitrogen, and for some plants there will be a higher level of phosphorus. Usually for green plants, for something like philodendrons, there will be more nitrogen, and then for flowering plants there will be more phosphorus in the fertilizer. But again, we will talk about this phosphorus thing a little bit later. These three are something that is called macronutrients, and aside from those, a well-rounded fertilizer, a well-balanced fertilizer will also have mesonutrients and micronutrients. Mesonutrients are things like magnesium, calcium, and sulfur, I believe. And micronutrients, well, there's a lot of them, and I'm not gonna memorize all of them. Who do you think I am? And as I previously said, a good fertilizer will have all of these in some quantities. And this is important because they all play some role in plant growth. Now, we're not gonna go way too deep about this because it's just a very complex, it's a very long topic, and aside from listening about this and like reading about it's not very fun, right? I don't think it's very interesting. Maybe it's interesting to read about it once, but we're not going to memorize this. No one's going to quiz you on this. This is not that type of summer camp. Magnesium is also a central component of chlorophyll, which is necessary for photosynthesis, as we have hopefully established in what, 4th, 5th grade of biology in elementary school? I think so. It is needed for cell division and protein formation, and without magnesium, chlorophyll cannot capture the sun's energy. So pretty vital to have some magnesium. And a lot of the deficiencies, which we will talk a little bit later about, but very, very little bit later about, will display themselves in yellowing leaves. And that typically means that the chlorophyll is going to chlorophyll heaven. Is there a chlorophyll heaven? Where does the chlorophyll go? Calcium is also another very vital element, and it is not a mobile element. It is actually taken up via the roots into the plant. It is moved through the plant via the transpiration process. And this means that how fast the calcium will move from the roots, so from the soil, to the growing parts of the plant will depend on environmental conditions, because transpiration depends on environmental conditions. Obviously, if it's colder, it will move slower, there will not be so much transpiration, and if it is warmer, well, obviously there will be a lot of transpiration, and that is also coincidentally the part where plants are actively growing. The reason why calcium is so important is because it plays a role in formation of new growth, and it also affects flowering to an extent and formation of fruit, but that is not actually so relevant to us when we talk about growing Hoyas. The importance of calcium is something that has been observed by orchid growers a lot, and how actually really important it is in formation of new growth. Especially with orchids that produce a lot of pseudobulbs, it is important for the proper growth of those that you have presence of calcium. All of these macro, meso, and micronutrients will be available to plants in nature via organic matter, whether it be leaf litter, maybe rain, because rain is usually fortified with nitrogen, or other various organic matter in nature, which is just a fancy way to say ant poop. Also dead bugs, Not all of the Hoyas rely on the ant poop, just Hoya mitrata, undulata, and lambi, and probably some other Hoyas, but it's also not necessary in cultivation to introduce ants and ant poop, so we're just not gonna talk about that part. We can do well with our fertilizers that we get. Something that is also important when it comes to fertilizers, and I will try not to talk too long about this because this can be a very complicated topic, and again, something that I honestly don't mess much with, so we're not gonna mess much with it, but it is the pH. Now, pH will be different in organic and inorganic potting mixes. The reason why pH is important, because if the pH is too low or too high, it may prevent the roots of the plants to take up the nutrients. It's called nutrient lockout. So it is important that the pH is suitable for your plants, and in organic mixes, pH is usually not an issue. You will sometimes see specific substrates that are said to be alkaline, and we do not need those. That's not something that we need for most Hoyas. There are some Hoyas that are said to be alkaline, like Hoya imperialis, I believe, and Hoyas from Eriostema section that I don't mess with, so we don't need that, but most of the Hoyas will need slightly acidic potting mix. And just by addition of bark and moss, and in general, actually all the organic matter, because it will break down over time, lowering the pH, your mix will be slightly acidic. So bark is something that is slightly acidic, moss is something that is slightly acidic, and I do believe that cocoa chips also fall into that category. So with organic mixes, you're really not gonna have much issues. over time, as they decompose, the pH will lower and lower, and at that time we probably also need to repot the plant, and too low of pH, to my understanding, can lead to root rot as well. In any case, if you grow in organic mixes, you most likely don't need to worry about pH. When it comes to inorganic mixes, a lot of people say that pH does not matter in pon, and to be quite honest, the jury for me is still out on that. I will talk about a little bit what I do when it comes to pH in pon. In leca, it is absolutely necessary to do something to regulate the pH, and it's usually using the pH down solution, and when you water, you will add that in your water. If you don't do it, the pH will be neutral or alkaline. And again, Hoyas are plants that would prefer slightly more acidic pH, so 6 to 6.5, I think that is what most people go for. I will just talk a little bit here about my experience with pon and what I do and what have been my results, because I do grow a lot of Hoyas in pon. A lot of people say that zeolite will regulate the pH. I'm not sure that the word regulate is the best one to use. I have not found that anywhere. I see that it neutralizes the pH, so it makes it neutral, which is not something that we necessarily want. But I also have seen that there is zeolite that can be alkaline and zeolite that can be acidic. So I don't know what type of zeolite I use in my pon. Maybe Lechuza can tell you what type of zeolite is in their pon. I just buy the pon from hydroponics store and keep my fingers crossed. Not, to be quite honest with you. But I do pH down when I water in pon, and so far no issues. I kind of eyeball it. I use pH strips because I killed 3 pH thingies that you measure pH with. Despite all the best care for that thingy, I killed 3 of them, and I decided not to waste my money. I just use the strips, and I go from anywhere to 6 to 6.5. I will be absolutely, happy with that. So it's a couple of drops of pH down in my water, and it takes care of that. And I have not had issues with that at all. So I guess it works. I don't know. I do want to quickly talk about nutrient deficiencies. And nutrient deficiencies is not something that I will deal a lot with Hoyas, because Hoyas are plants that, while they require obviously fertilizer, they're not so hungry like monsteras and philodendrons. There have been odd couple of times when I noticed yellowing leaves with green leaf nervature, and they stay like that for a long time, which is usually the sign of nutrient deficiencies. And in that case, I would say that you probably have some issues with the roots. Maybe the roots are not taking up nutrients for whatever reason. Maybe the pH is too low. And this is especially true if you know that you have been using fertilizer that has all the micro, meso, and macronutrients. Kind of got them in the wrong order there. If you know that you've been using a fertilizer with all of these, it's very unlikely that your plant will be dealing with something that's like calcium or magnesium deficiency, because it's already in the fertilizer. They don't need copious amounts of magnesium. It's more likely a root issue or pH issue, something in regards to that. The way that I've been dealing with this is usually wait for healthy new growth, cut it and propagate it again, and things have been fine. Change the potting mix, stuff like that. Now let's talk about the fertilizer that I use. And this is not sponsored, unfortunately. I always say this. The fertilizer that I use is Rain Mix. Rain Mix is developed by this orchid nursery, Akerne, and I believe they are in Belgium. Rain Mix is based off a very, very well-known fertilizer in the orchid community, and that is the MSU, Michigan State University fertilizer. There are many articles written about this fertilizer, to which I cannot tell you much about because they are behind a paywall and it's like $80. So if you are a member of the American Orchid Society, you can read a lot about the MSU fertilizer, but unfortunately I cannot bring you that here. All I know is this is a very, very good fertilizer. I did find one article that I will link down below, and you can read kind of like experience of this grower using MSU fertilizer. But if you go to many orchid channels, you will just see very positive experiences and very positive reviews of the MSU fertilizer and Rain Mix fertilizer as well. And both of these have lower levels of phosphorus than you would expect for flowering plants, and it seems that that's, for whatever reason, I don't know, I haven't read the articles, but for whatever reason the lower levels actually work and they don't hinder flowering at all. Actually all of them do flower well. And I do add fertilizer each time that I water, which is kind of the principle here with Rain Mix, that you want to use low dosage at all times of this fertilizer. Also, that will depend, of course, on your conditions. If you don't have grow lights and if there isn't a lot of light and warmth in winter, obviously you don't use fertilizer then, or you use very, very, very little. In order to use fertilizer, to use the recommended quantities, you really also need the light and the warmth. They have to be thinking they're growing, and in their natural environments they would be growing. And I just want to make one last point here. My thoughts on the orchid mist fertilizers. I don't know if that's actually the brand or whatever. It's like the fertilizer that you spray on the leaves. I don't think they're very efficient, to be quite honest. I see a lot of people use it. I think we can convince ourselves that something is doing things that it's not doing. And the reason why I think it's not doing much is because tomatoes are not open all day. There are times of the day when they're open, whether it be evening, morning, or at certain part of the day. And there is like a way to know. I think the plants are divided. I can't remember this. This is like a very, very higher level here, but they're not open at all times. And if you're spraying your plant at a time when tomatoes are not open, they can't take that in. They're just not open throughout the day. They will close so they can preserve the waters. I think it's usually in the morning when they're open, because then there is mist as well, so they don't lose so much water, or during the night. It really depends from one plant to another. I just don't think this is something that you need to be spending your money on. Also, it's very expensive. If you do want to spray your plants with fertilizer, just dilute it yourself and put it in a spray bottle. It's not anything different. That's what it is. Another thing that I do want to quickly mention is the slow release fertilizers, and I've been using them a lot with my philodendrons and I love it. Philodendrons are so hungry, I can never give them enough fertilizer. I have used them here and there with Hoyas. I'm a little bit iffy about using them with Pon. I know that Lechuza Pon comes with slow release fertilizer. I put a couple of sprinkles in my pond here and there. I don't really notice any difference, to be quite honest with you, because I also fertilize them each time I water. There was like fertilizer in the reservoirs, and the plants that are lucky to have self-watering and that are lucky to have the reservoir filled. Should make a note. I don't have paper. I need to water the plants. Oh well, if I forget. Such is life. That is all for today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Hoya Summer Camp. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below if you have anything to add about the fertilizers. But I don't want to be hearing about bananas unless you are gonna leave a recipe for something delicious with bananas. And I don't think that's banana bread. I am not a fan of banana bread. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I will see you very soon in the next episode, and actually in the next video, and then comes the next episode. And now we're gonna get into more practical parts of Hoya Summer Camp. We will be cutting and trellising, and we're not gonna be doing a lot of DIYs, but you know, it's gonna be fun. Next time, get ready to get your hands ready, I think, if I have not forgot about an episode. Okay, bye! I would like to take some time to thank all of my patrons who make content like this possible. Massive shout out to my $5 patrons. My 3 anonymous patrons, Alex von Siebenthal, Anne-Margaret Moen, Angela Bernard, Angela Parrish, Anne C., Ashley Hoyas, Beth Gibson, Betsy, Catherine Molina, Danube Daniels, Daria Kaminska, Diane Sikorsky, Dipanjali Rao, Farah, Gina Geise, Go Green Tropical, Heather Uppenkamp, Hoji Scott, Houseplant Heather, Hoya Heather, Yana Griffin, Jessica Gio, Jovan Denot, Kara, Casey Gross, Kelly Cook, Kelso, Kiwi Mochi, Kristen Sherwood, LePlan Steph, Mandy Milliken, Marcel Har, Marcelina Novosadsky, Maria West, Mars B, Martina Alif Perday, Marty Miller, Mary Rose, Melissa Walker, Michael Curley, Michelle Heron, Nicole Ferranti, Moa Edmond, Neil Yang, Niha Basu, Nicole Moreau, Nicole and Caleb of Schlief Tropicals, Nina Nguyen, Nita Macy, PJ, Plant Druid, Planting with Nat, Rachel Peterson, Robin L. Jennings, Robin Roos, Salom Adal, Sherry Kumar, Stephanie H2O, Sybil Williams, Tanya, Tessa Martins, Tiana Harley Thomas, The One True Kyle, Tia B, TJWO, Trista Bailey, Wendy Foreman, Wendy Rossman, Xenia Green, Youth the Walamut, Zerdrama, and Zlokobniponi. A big thank you to my $3 patrons, Andy H, Angelina Farnan, Anna K, Brenda Little, Brana Phillips, Colleen Coyle Levi, Kilone, Claudia L, Aaron Keenan, Catherine Parsons, Lindsay, Lisa Helling, Morgan Kennedy, Nella, Plantolenia Ringlov, and Tang Watanasria Cole. And a thank you to my $1 patrons, Kari, Christina Greengrass, Constance Couture Helvetica, Edith W, Emilia Bronson, Joanna Pearson, Jolie Sullivan, Kayla Vavra, Kelly Ash, Chris Perez, Lauren M, Lori Ann Subramaniam, Luzman Fernandez, Neely Spicer, and Olivia Chinmuller.